You all know, because it was front page news, that a few weeks ago, the United States sent military airplanes, B-2s, over the country of Iran and dropped some of the largest bombs that exist in the world on 3 different locations in Iran, where the U.S. government said they suspected enrichment of uranium to the point of where it could become a weapon, an atomic bomb in effect. I'm not going to talk about the fact that Iran was not at war with the United States, or the United States with it, that this was a completely unilateral decision made by Mr. Trump, who, having promised to end the endless wars, that's his term, not only hasn't ended the one in Ukraine, not only hasn't ended the one in Gaza, but has apparently decided to start another one. I'm not going to talk about those issues around that. I want, however, to draw a lesson from what happened. A couple of days later, the Iranians responded by sending missiles over and damaging an American military base, the largest American military base in the Middle East, which is in the country of Qatar. Here's what I want you to think about with me. If there was a serious risk of nuclear development, of bombing, of enrichment of a uranium beyond what you use for generating electricity, and that which can be so terribly destructive, dropping a massive bomb on such a facility risks what? It risks spreading radioactivity. You're not sure exactly what's down there. That was admitted. Well, if you're not sure, why would you take such a risk? 2 days later, the Iranians sent missiles crashing into and exploding parts of the American military base, where the Iranians would have had to assume there would be nuclear bombs or nuclear missiles stored by the United States. That's what military bases do. Well, here's what's likely the answer to my wondering. Both sides knew that none of that was there. Had Mr. Trump risked releasing radioactivity into the air, he would have been guilty of an incredible war crime. The only thing comparable was the dropping of the atomic bombs on Hiroshima and Nagasaki at the end of World War II, and we were at war at that time. Not that that justified it, but we were at war. We were not at war with Iran. So what the heck is going on? We don't know what was at the bottom of the mountains that the United States bombed, and we don't know what was in the base that the Iranians bombed. But here's the most reasonable guess. The United States knew that the stuff wasn't there in Iran, and Iran knew that the nuclear stuff wasn't there in Qatar. So what was all this about? We are now living in a society in which we are kept from knowledge of what is really going on and presented instead with carefully choreographed political theater. That's all we really know. A theatrical one-off strike with bombs that immediately stop and don't resume. And the other side does the same thing in reverse with missiles. And there we are. Neither of them can explain what they were doing in any way that makes sense. And we are left not to know. That was never the intent of the notion of a democratic society. I want to turn next to the Democratic race for mayor that was won by Zoran Mamdani. It is really crucial that people understand what a new milestone has been achieved. A few years ago, a socialist named Bernie Sanders proved that millions of Americans were more than willing to listen to, support, vote for, organized for a socialist. A few years later, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez proved that a dynamic, young, energetic socialist could win and hold support in a corner of New York City. And now we have Mr. Mamdani proving that what Ocasio-Cortez in a part of New York City achieved, he can achieve for the whole city. And which city is it? One of the world's great cities, New York. The United States' #1 city, New York, where a big majority, Mr. Mamdani didn't win by a little, he won by a great deal over the former governor, a regular hack Democratic politician who came in a very distant second. This is a bombshell. This is shaking up all of the political establishment, not just the Democrats. As you can see from the grudging admiration that even several Republicans could not help themselves but show. It is a sign that the times are changing, and changing in big, powerful ways. Millions of New Yorkers are excited by this new opportunity for what was purged out of American politics over the last 70 years, socialism, to show its power, the way it has all around the world, by showing it can excite and win the support of people here in the United States in a big, powerful way. But here's what the BRICS announced that I want you to think about. They just crossed $1 trillion worth of trade among them. That is, among Russia, China, India, Brazil, and so on. Why is that important? The United States strategy in Ukraine was a failure because you didn't understand that Russia could turn and trade with the BRICS after it lost the ability to trade with Europe. And you don't understand why China stands up to Mr. Trump's tariffs unless you understand that China can turn to the BRICS to sell what it can't sell in the United States. Mr. Trump, as I have told you before, his tariffs are serving to isolate the United States, no one else. We're drowning in war. So that's what I want to talk to you about. President Trump campaigned on ending what he called the forever wars, which he blamed on the Democrats. He had a good part of justification in doing that. After all, it was Mr. Biden who got the U.S., and I say that intentionally, the U.S. into being the partner for Ukraine in the war against Russia. But Mr. Trump has now, in the first half year of his 4 years of office, overwhelmed the United States in war, not ended them. The Ukraine war remains. The Israeli war on the Palestinians in Gaza remains. And now the Israelis, to the wonderment of a world, a small country like that, already using other countries, mostly the United States' money and weapons to rain terror down on a largely defenseless Palestinian population, that little country of Israel is now undertaking a war that it started against the 90 million people Israel has somewhere between 7 and 10 that are not Arabs whom they oppress. So they're warring against Iran with its 90 million people. And as if that war weren't bad enough, Mr. Trump, and remember, the United States is not part of that war, not legally, not by declaration, not by any discussion in the United States Congress that I'm aware of, has demanded, I quote you now from President Trump, the unconditional surrender of one of the two sides. I'll leave it to you to guess which one. And if the news is correct, Pakistan has threatened to enter the war on Iran's side against Israel. And I want to remind people, Pakistan does have nuclear weapons. None of this is worth it. Not for the American people, not for the Israeli people, not for the Iranian or the Pakistani people. This is not in anyone's interest except Small groups of politicians and military commanders and the industries that profit from the military commanders, they may get something out of this, but they're a tiny group of people compared to all those threatened in their livelihoods, in their bodies and minds, and in life itself. When things get to this point, you know that something basic is wrong here, because reasonable people would not work themselves into such a situation. There's plenty of oil in the world. We don't need to kill each other over it. There are plenty of ways to resolve conflicts. Israel-Arab, Israel-Iranian, so on, that don't require mass destruction and killing. That's always the important thing to remember. Not after the war is over, when all those kinds of comments become commonplace as people look back in horror at the prices they've paid. For what? No. Let's do it now, when it matters. Stop this craziness. Mr. Trump has demanded the unconditional surrender, his words, of Iran, a country with which the United States is not at war, a country that we were supposed to negotiate with last Sunday, and that was only stopped when the Israelis attacked on Friday. The issues have been brewing a long time. I remember in 2004, Secretary of State Powell explaining that no, the constant rumors that Iran was on the verge of a nuclear weapon were not true. And I know that every 2 to 3 years, that claim was made and it was rebutted, and it turned out that they weren't making nuclear weapons. Could it be true this time? Sure it could. I wouldn't know. But you know the old story of the boy who cried wolf. You keep doing that and it isn't true, then one day when it might be true, nobody will believe you. Well, most of the world doesn't believe Israel and doesn't believe the United States because they cried that thing, they made that claim over and over. It has exactly the same persuasive power that the claim Iraq has weapons of mass destruction, i.e. nuclear weapons, and that turned out to be phony also. It would be naive and foolish not to remember all of that, to stick one's head in the sand and pretend none of it happened, that Mr. Netanyahu, despite the most horrible program in the world against the people of Gaza, would now want to spread war even further. What does he imagine will be the attitude of all of the peoples whose lives have been destroyed by Israelis? What will they have in their hearts, in their minds? What kind of a future are you building with this behavior? It's the same question always asked of combatants, and for which they rarely have anything other than an answer that is somewhere between outrageous and stupid. War is stupid. It's a failure of getting a reasonable settlement without paying the absurd prices of war. The United States is no longer immune. The two oceans no longer protect us. We are vulnerable too, and we should learn the lesson before it overwhelms us. There is still time, although the time is getting short. Nothing going on in the world today deserves or is worth mass warfare, killing huge numbers of people. That is the bottom line for a rational community. To ignore it means you have entered into a crazy place, an irrational situation, and there your only reasonable response is to get away from the irrationality as fast and as far as you can. The President of the United States, the new president, announced he's going to deport Mexicans into Mexico where there are no jobs for them. He's going to put tariffs on Mexican goods, which means they can't sell them in the United States the way they used to, so they will be laying off people, worsening the unemployment to which the deported immigrants will be added. And of course, if you deport immigrants, you cut back on the flow of remittances, they're called, the portion of the income that an undocumented Mexican earns here in the United States that he or she sends back for their children or their elderly. So the response of the United States to the two countries we border with who helped us with the fires is to smash them down. You know, history will look back on this and will shake its heads in a mixture of disbelief and disgust. Mr. Trump doesn't express anything that would give me the sense that he has even the faintest clue about what the decline of the United States involves and what it represents. Because if he did, he wouldn't have, not even Donald Trump would have the audacity to suggest he can hold it back. That's a little bit like imagining that scary runaway train can be controlled if you just say stop. Or it's right up there with the way to deal with the problem of drugs is to just say no. It doesn't tell you anything about the problem, but it tells you that there's something wrong with a person who says such things because they're so out of touch. So Mr. Trump, sure, he blames Mr. Biden and by extension Mr. Obama or Clinton or Bush. Whoever went before him made a whole host of terrible mistakes, which he's going to fix. All of them were deficient in putting America first, but this one is going to do it. It's a kind of cheap theater that tells you about the person putting it on and not about the reality. So let me get to answer your question. What is the decline of the United States, and why what Mr. Trump is talking about is not that, and why what he's proposing is no solution to that. The decline has to do with something you might even call natural. And by that I mean every empire that the world has known, from ancient Greece, Rome, right on to the modern one. And indeed, the one that gave birth to the United States, namely the British Empire, of which the United States was once a minor colony, never as important to Britain as India was, never as important to Britain as much of Africa, particularly in the north, was, but an important part that it fought a war to keep, the Revolutionary War of the 18th century. Okay, the United States inherited the empire from the British. By the end of the 19th century, and certainly by the time of World War I in the 20th century, Britain's empire was in decline and the American empire was rising to replace it. And the rise of the American empire went across the entirety of the 20th century. It was a good ride for the United States in the sense that across the rise of the empire, almost all boats were lifted. White Americans, at least, enjoyed rising incomes, rising job opportunities, better housing, public schools in the middle, and so on. The 20th century was a remarkable good time for the United States because we lived in a rising empire. By the time of the 21st century, now, the last 20 years, what we should have known was coming arrived. Every empire that went up went down eventually. Every one, no exceptions. The betting person would have understood in 1940 or 60 or 80 that it wasn't a question of whether the empire and the economy would decline, and when just came. About 15 years ago, the way I count it, but give or take, it's never something that happens at a moment. And here are some of the signs, if you like. You might have missed one or the other, but when you add up all of those I'm about to give you, it's unmistakable. The war in Vietnam was a war between the United States and the Communist Party, initially of North Vietnam. The Communist Party of North Vietnam won the war, and the United States lost the war. That's the reality. The government of unified Vietnam, North and South, since that time, since 1975, the government has been the Communist Party. Our enemy won, we left and lost. A little while later, we fought a war in Afghanistan against something called the Taliban. We lost, they won. You know who governs Afghanistan now? Is the Taliban. We lost in Iraq. We wanted to do away with none of that work. Yes, Saddam Hussein is gone, but the Shia and Shiite militias and all, that's who governs Iraq now. And we're in the process of losing the war in Ukraine. These are not just isolated events. These are one after the other. Moreover, we are losing, in the case of Vietnam, in the case of Afghanistan, in the case of Iraq, against countries, our adversary, that are among the poorest on this planet. Here we are, the rich powerhouse. We can't win those wars. That ought to be a kind of moment. Whoa, what's going on here? The signs are even bigger and easier. Everything is tilting against the United States. It's not this or that political decision. It's not even this or that president or this or that war. Something bigger and more profound and more long-lasting is underway. And because the empire was so crucial, it is also the case that the capitalist economic system of the United States is shrinking, is unable to function. It can't do what it used to do. It is being out-competed left and right every day, every week brings more evidence. Somebody wants to sell more goods. So what do? They go to an advertiser and they give money to the advertiser, say, put our picture of our product up there on a billboard, put an ad in the newspaper, put an ad on television, make us look as good as you can. And the advertiser takes the money and he puts an image up there of a happy young person enjoying the product, suggesting to you that if you buy that soap and use it, your sex life will get much better, suggesting if you drink that soda, you will have many happy friends down there on the beach. You know the drill. You see it everywhere. But now let's look a little more carefully. The job of the advertiser is to hype whatever is good about the product. Hype may be something that's actually good, or make it up. It doesn't matter. And the same advertiser has a second job: hide whatever's bad about the project. The cigarette makes you very sophisticated. Yeah, but we won't talk about what it does to your lung. That's the story. Advertising is a way of communicating between people, but it's not honest. It's dishonest. It hypes real and imagined positives, and it hides negatives. If positive and negative are always intertwined, then honest communication faces both of them, tells you the good, the bad, and what the overall opinion is based on facing the good and the bad. Advertising isn't about that. Advertising is hustling you, lying to you about the good, hiding the bad to get money out of your wallet. It corrupts the communication that every community, every family, and every person depends on. Capitalism invented advertising, and that's another reason why we can do better than the capitalist system. We begin with Senator Joni Ernst of Iowa. She is a Republican, and as a member of the United States Senate, she has one of the best medical care and medical insurance programs available to anybody working anywhere in the United States. That she gets as a senator. She doesn't have to pay for it. But as a Republican member of the Senate, she is also, of course, voting on all kinds of issues these days, including the decision of the Republican leadership in the House of Representatives to make massive cuts. We're talking many, many millions of dollars, cuts in the Medicaid program. That's the program in the United States that insures people who cannot afford an expensive medical insurance program based on the income that they earn. And she got into the news recently when she was trying to explain to a meeting in Iowa of Republicans, she's a member of that party, why she was supportive of making these huge cuts in the Medicaid program. And it turns out there were people in the audience, supporters of hers, we assume, who didn't like that and who shouted in the meeting that cutting Medicaid is going to kill significant numbers of people who will no longer be able to afford the medical care that keeps them alive when these cuts go through. Senator Ernst then did something which deserves the critical attention I'm giving it, and many others in and out of the media did. She looked at these people with no sympathy whatsoever and said to them, "We're all gonna die someday," or words to that effect. Okay, let's look at this. There are vast numbers of people being less well served by cuts in the Veteran Administration, hospitals, by cuts in the Medicare, Medicaid, across the board. In other countries that have better, more comprehensive medical care systems than we are, no such cuts could be passed. The politicians there wouldn't dare in many of their countries. Not all, but many. Why are we doing that here? When pressed by reporters who couldn't quite believe what she had just said, does she mean, well, then if you're poor, you die a little sooner? Who cares? Certainly what sounded like she meant. She then began the mantra that comes from the Trump government. This is only supposed to get rid of cheaters, people who get medical care and may not need it or are cheating the system. As most of you know, every system ever invented has people who cheat on it. You know the system we call marriage? Do people cheat? Do we get rid of marriage as a result? No. Do people cheat on their income tax? Yes. Do we therefore have no income tax? No. Cheating is a problem that you can address, as most bureaucracies and most programs, including Medicare and Medicaid, have always done. They don't need a new burst of efficiency. They work at that all the time, as anyone familiar with these programs should know. This is all BS. They can't face what they are doing, except Senator Ernst. She did face it. We all die sometimes. You'll just die a little sooner. We're gonna save money on you. Say I, who has a better medical care program than you'll ever imagine, let alone get, because I'm a senator, and you are someone I am going to help die sooner than they otherwise might. Wow. The United States has the highest health care costs of any country on earth by a lot. It's a scandal. The whole world knows it, except Americans. But if you have the highest health care, then you kind of owe it to the poor among you to help them pay for that's why we have Medicaid. What are you doing cutting it? And how dare you set yourself up as someone who can preside over dying? Do we have economic problems? Yeah, we do. Is it appropriate in the same political party and the same government of the United States that is perpetuating the tax cuts for corporations and the rich passed in December of 2017, is continuing them, which Mr. Trump is, and adding more tax cuts for corporations and the rich, which is what he's doing in his big, beautiful tax. Then at the same time, to take money away from the medical care for the poor? What kind of country is this? No Christian ethics I ever heard of would justify doing this. The face of fascism is floating in the air when these things happen.